And I'm going to introduce briefly Professor, our next speaker, Professor Ingvild Flaskerud. I hope I pronounce well. I'm not. I have some difficulties for the name, so please correct me. Professor Ingvild, basically, she has specialized in the study of Twelver Shi'ism in Iran and Europe. Her research interests include Muslim visual material culture and aesthetics, gender issues, the ritual as a site of social and ethical discourses, and Twelver Shia migration to the West. She is the co-editor of Muslim Pilgrimage in Europe, which is published in 2018, and she has contributed to publications on Muslim visual culture and women's and ritual performance and Muslim ritual practices. She also produced an ethnographic film introducing Iranian Shia women as a ritual performance. This basically is about the standards barriers of Hussein, women commemorating Karbala in 2003. And today she will speak about a new generation Twelver Shiites in Europe, what knowledge and competence are necessary to live a Muslim way of life. Thank you to be with us, Professor Flaskerud, and please, the floor is yours, and you can start now.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, perfectly.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much, and I really enjoyed the two previous lectures. I think that what I'm going to say will speak to both of them in various ways. But first of all, I would like to notify that my approach is different from what was Oliver's approach. My approach is the bottom up. I'm working with the youth organizations which are continue to develop and continue to work. I have not yet settled on any kind of theoretical frames to try to discuss this within, but I think so that is later to come. What I want to do is more to try to see what's going on from the youth's perspective. How do they perceive the world? And to address this issue by looking at what do they do? How do they organize? What do they talk about? And so on and so forth. And I think also in the end, it will show that the experience of the Shiites in the various European countries are very different. The Shia community in Norway is very small. The Norwegian population is very small. It's only 5 million people. And we do not have the institutions in place, the Shia institutions in place, which you have in England. So it's a very, very different social, religious, political, authority-related situation to work within for the youth. And I think it also gives them maybe more space to carve out the space for themselves. But maybe we can discuss this, Oliver. What has also been your experience in England? Okay, then I turn to my paper presentation. The last 12 years have witnessed the establishment of several self-governed groups by young Shia Muslims. And by self-governed, I mean activities initiated by the young people and administrated by them independently from mosques and other religious organizations. Now, in Norway, there are many ways in which Muslims organize. They are organized in mosques or other types of religious ceremonial locations. And they also organize in national umbrella organizations, such as the Islamic Council of Norway, which was established in 1993, and a new established in 2017 called the Muslim Dialogue Network. Notice this term dialogue. This is a buzzword that has become very prominent in the last 5-6 years. And this umbrella organization has regular meetings with authorities, such as at the municipal level in Oslo and other places in Norway, as well as government. In addition, there is a long tradition of the youth to organize in student organizations. But in this paper, I discuss how we can explain the need for establishing many new self-governing youth groups among the Twelver Shiites. And I will answer this question by analyzing what is the purpose of the groups and how do the members of the groups proceed to achieve the purposes. The data draw from 9 groups established and run by young Shia from the age of 30 to 15. The first was established in 2009, the latest this year, 2021. I have used a combination of methods. I have carried out field research at meetings, at stands and parade organized by the groups. I have conducted semi-formal interviews with participants, and I have reviewed information publicly available on Facebook, YouTube, and other social media. And based on this, I have mapped the group's activities to establish some categories based on the purpose, the method, and the content. So what is the purpose of the groups? Based on self-reporting in conversations and on Facebook, the common general purpose is to address the relationship between Islam or Muslims and the Norwegian society. I have identified important arenas to which the youth respond. These are 3 arenas. It is the national debate about Islam. That is the first. Over the last decades, these debates have revolved around politics of integration, whether Islam is compatible with Western values, for example, the freedom of women, the freedom of speech, and also the issue of Islamic terrorism in the country and abroad. However, since 2008, and increasingly since 2012, the debate has been inspired by the establishment of 2 Sunni Salafi youth groups in Norway. First, IslamNet, which was founded in 2008 and has been characterized as an expression of Puritan Salafism because it takes its authoritative guidance from Salafi scholars based in Saudi Arabia. And IslamNet's main rationale for actions is proselytizing towards Muslims and non-Muslim individuals. Secondly, there is the group called the Prophet's Ummah, which was consolidated in 2012 after people have participated in various street demonstrations, which received a lot of media attention. For example, against the Muhammad cartoon conflicts, the Norwegian participation in the NATO forces in Afghanistan, and the Islamophobic film of the innocence of Muslims, which was produced in 2012. This group is described as Salafi jihadist by another Norwegian scholar, and they endorsed, for example, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who was the leader of the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. Based on these groups' activities, the image of Islam and Muslims emerge in the Norwegian public as Muslims are very conservative and they are violent and potentially dangerous. A major turning point for the Shia's engagement was, however, the terror event on July 22nd in 2011, where 17 people were killed by an ethnic Norwegian young man motivated by ideas to be found on the far right. In the first hours after the detonation of a bomb at the government building in central Oslo and the massacre of young people attending the Labour Party's annual summer camp outside Oslo, the public media speculated on the identity and motivations of the perpetrator. The first suggested identity to be discussed was a Muslim terrorist. These initial speculations created fear among many Muslims. One interlocutor explained to me, "We thought, if this is a Muslim terrorist, we can pack and leave. We have no future here." Thus, many had hurried home or stayed at home and waiting for what would be the conclusion of the investigation, who was the terrorist. It was not a Muslim, but we can see that these speculations on whether it was could have been a Muslim demonstrated to the Muslims that there is a deep distrust towards the Muslim population in the Norwegian public. Secondly, then there is the international debate, which also influenced the national debate. I will just mention very briefly, this include years of war and violence instigated by individuals and groups acting in the name of Islam, such as Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. Then there are violent responses from Muslims to what they perceive as defaming of Islam, such as the many Muhammad cartoon crisis, again, this Islamophobic film, The Innocence of Muslims, and the attack of the office of Charlie Hebdo in Paris in 2015. The violent reactions in the Norwegian public often used as evidence of the Muslims' lack of respect for freedom of speech, for example. Now, the third level here is the internal Muslim level, the internal Muslim debate. Many Shia youth have been unhappy by how Muhammad and holy symbols are offended and ridiculed in the Norwegian public as well as internationally. Many are also upset about the harassment of Muslim women wearing headscarf in the public. Another source of harassment has come from Muslim Sunni youth. In the years between 2008 and 2013, in particular, many high school Shia students complained to me about being harassed by schoolmates, influenced by the Sunni Salafi youth groups. And they were expressing intolerance towards non-Salafi Muslims, in particular the Shia. The Shia were accused of being kuffar, infidels, and many felt intimidated and worried. And they were looking at what was going on in these Salafi groups. For example, these Salafi groups also recruited people to go and fight in Syria and Iraq. So looking at these three levels, the national debate, the international debate, and the internal Muslim debate, the Shia youth were looking for ways to deal with all of these issues that were brought up. So comparing now the various groups, their objectives and approaches vary somehow, but in general, the purpose of the groups is to spread knowledge about Islam and to support each other in finding a way to live harmoniously in the Norwegian society. So how will they achieve this? An overview of the activities demonstrate that they think there is a need for knowledge about the teachings of Islam. Here I want to draw the attention to a couple of observations. All groups see the first step to provide more information about the teachings of Islam to be through self-education. And to educate themselves, they have turned first to the classic literature. but they apply different methods in their self-educating endeavor to deduce and conceptualize meaning from the texts. And at this point, I think it's interesting to note that the method did not involve interpreting guidance from human resources at the local mosques. They did not turn to the mosques to say, help us, teach us. No, they established their own groups. And there are several reasons given by the interlocutors that can explain their reliance on self-education. A young man explained that it was only natural. The young know the local language. They grew up in the Norwegian culture, and they could now create what he called a Norwegian Islam. Moreover, I was told, some groups met in gender mixed spaces, and this was not appreciated by every mosque board. And a third factor was that the group's form of organizing was based on non-hierarchical principles, which did not concur with the hierarchical structures of the mosques. So we see in various ways they try to distance themselves from the way the mosques organize, their interpretive frameworks, and their lack of knowledge about the Norwegian culture as they see it. So I think that these explanations point in one direction. There is a need for a new interpretative space. After mapping the group's activities to establish the purpose, method, and content, I suggest there is a strong tendency to making connection between classical Islamic sources and ways of localizing Islam. Notice that I did not say making a connection with classical Islamic sources and localized Islam, but localizing Islam. My point is that the youth are not seeking to conform with what is already established, an already localized form of Islam, but to make Islam current, to speak to any current situation. And the knowledge and competence they seek must assist in this process. I will in the following give some examples of how each group seek to localize Islam. Two groups were involved in translating Arabic and Persian texts into Norwegian. One was established in 2014. When we spoke in 2015, there were 13 members in the group. 3 did the translations, and the others were involved in funding, printing, and deciding which texts to translate. They translated texts on topics which they believed there were a need for more knowledge about. One publication is a translation of a text authored by Ayatollah El-Sistani. The 15-page long booklet is about the guidance offered by the Prophet Muhammad and how to behave in this life and the next, how to live in this life and how to benefit from that in the next. The text was chosen because it spoke of grace and love. One member explained, in the light of the increasing Islamic terror, like IS and so on, it is important to show that Islam is the path of grace and love. The text had been published in 2014, but the message was still of urgent importance, they thought, when we spoke in 2015, as the Charlie Hebdo attack had happened just a week earlier. Regarding what to take away from the booklet, a text in Norwegian on the back cover explained, Islam stands for love, peace, grace, and respect. It demonstrates that Islam teaches us to help, collaborate, and contribute to the best of society and each individual. As we can observe, there is here a focus on mediating ethical values recognized by a Twelver Shia religious authority. But according to the members, there was also another important purpose in making the translations. In order to create a Norwegian Islam, it was necessary to translate Islam to Norwegian. To translate Islam to Norwegian or into Norwegian. That is to use the Norwegian language to speak about Islam. This was very important. To use the Norwegian language to speak about Islam. Secondly, we have the study circles. Another group translating texts was established in 2019. This group was not only concerned about giving Muslims access to Islamic original sources, but to motivate them to read texts on their own and interpret them in the light of the current social context. Therefore, this group was organized as a study circle. So they organized themselves to translate important texts, such as the Quran, passages from the Quran, hadith, supplications, sayings of the Prophet, the Imams, and translating it into Norwegian, and then to read it and to discuss it based on their own understandings of what the text could say something about. So differently from the first group I mentioned, meeting was not sought based on the advices of a religious authority, but on personal understanding. After the attacks in 2010 in Norway, this group felt it was urgent to also counteract prejudice, hate, and extremism. They initiated an interfaith dialogue collaboration with Christian and Jewish groups. And in meetings, they informed each other about religious traditions, conceptualizations, for example, prayer, fast, and so on. They also visited each other's places of devotion, such as the church, the synagogue, and the mosque. Another method is to hold seminars and lectures. And particularly 3 groups convened to organize seminar and lectures in which they taught each other. They used themselves to prepare a talk and give a lecture. The format of the meetings were very similar to lectures and seminars at educational institutions like the university and colleges. They would use PowerPoints, and after the lecture, there was a break and there was a question and answer session. And most attendants were familiar with this format from their educational background. In various ways, these groups continued, they combined lecture on different topics with critical reflection on what is the message of Islam, seen from a Twelver Shia perspective, and how to be a Muslim in Norway. So there would also be a debate then about how can we live as Muslims in Norway? What does Islam tell us? And how can we apply this in the Norwegian context? The motivation are reflected in the following. There was a lecturer, for example, who asked his audience, is Islam inherited from one generation to the next? He said himself, no. And as underlined by another lecturer, if someone asks you about Islam, how do you answer? That you do not know? No. We have to know Islam is faith, knowledge, and action. So we can see that the topics addressed in the lectures and seminars show that there is a real engagement with the time and place in which they live. For example, the role of Muslim in society is a topic of one lecture, in which the lecturer talked about the rights and duties of Muslims in Western society. After the attack of the Charlie Hebdo in 2015, the topic of a lecture was about how to respond when Islam was offended. Being critical of the use of the violence, the speaker advised people to be patient and calm. The Prophet Muhammad was had always encouraged knowledge and being knowledgeable. So this is the right way to respond would be to inform people about Islam. They should use knowledge as a bridge and not emotional response. A third way is public events. Two groups are involved in organizing parades and stands on religious holiday to inform the public about Islam. The first of these took place in 2012, very much motivated by the Salafi groups I had mentioned. And the information in the Norwegian newspapers about Norwegian Muslims traveling to Syria and Iraq to fight. The Shia groups wanted to present the public with an alternative view of Islam, to raise local Muslim voices, focusing on shared common humanity across religious identities, and to embrace peace and freedom. To achieve this, they went out in the streets to interact with people, using the Shia ritual material culture to facilitate such interaction. Now, lastly, some groups communicate mainly on Facebook. One of these groups, which was organized in 2021, has around 600 members, and it is dedicated to throw light on the history of the Ahl Bayt, how they have been persecuted and killed and martyred, and also to share information about the Prophet and the Ahl Bayt. The Facebook format permits people to post and share topics. It also allows people to respond to each other, and some of the posts have spurred long discussions. Others have not. But in this case, the site functioned as a notification about religious holidays, charity works, stories, or hagiographic narrations about the imams, and also information about the sayings of the imams, about worship, and about, and also they have posted videos on prayer. The last group to have been established is also in 2021. This is a website. It is therefore much more, we can say, monologic. It just posts information about religious holidays, about the sayings of the Prophet, quotes from the Quran, and so on. So it's more kind of providing information, but not inviting to any debates or discussions or direct reflections. I have said that these groups are self-educational. They teach each other about religion through discussing texts, giving lectures, and posting material online. I have not said anything about from where they seek the information about Islam. In fact, they seldom reveal their sources except saying that it is from the Quran, the Prophet, or the Imams. The absence of mentioning the Twelver Shia authority of religious scholars such as the Marja al-Taqlid is quite remarkable. And a discussion during a meeting I attended in 2015 maybe throw light upon this. Some members of the group hosting this meeting asked why it was not permitted to quote Marja al-Taqlid when the youth sometimes referred to their guidings on Facebook and in lectures. The explanation given by the members of the board of this group was that discussants often attacked each other because of the marja'a person who they followed, instead of giving attention to the ideas that was voiced. And they wanted to shift the focus from a discussion of which marja is the best to, in fact, discuss the ideas that they were presenting. some concluding remarks. Yeah.
Ingrid, we are a bit running our time.
Okay.
If you can arrive to the conclusion, that would be great. Thank you very much. Sorry for that.
Yes. So what knowledge and competence is necessary? As I said, they turn to classical sources, but they also try to create an interpretive space. They try to localize Islam by making Islam speaking to the current situation. The language has become very important, and it's not because they don't know English. They know English very well. They can check sites internationally, but they actually need the language to voice their own opinions and to conceptualize Islam in a way which is meaningful to them. And I think that this is also interesting in relation to how Islam has developed in Norway until so far. For example, the mosques, they stress learning Arabic, the youth stress learning Norwegian, translating the text into Norwegian. The mosques mediate the marja's interpretations. The youth try to establish a space for themselves to make their own interpretations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Flaskerud. It was very interesting, and also especially in the analytical part about the youth people in Norwegia. And probably I will ask you some couple of questions at the end of this panel.